Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about the intersection of psychology and true crime. And thank you to the psych nerds that DM'd me on Instagram, that sent me emails, that commented on videos asking me to please cover this case. I definitely understand why people wanted a breakdown of this case. I have two prior videos where I reviewed Zachary Hughes's testimony, and I also reviewed the closing arguments. Today, we're just going to talk about the overview of this case. And if you all have questions, I will be able to answer those questions. I also have thoughts on why the defense was not able to introduce the evidence that was found after her being so after her capital M, and y'all know, so for YouTube, I can't say certain words, especially this early. And so we are not going to be looking at any clips or anything today because I have a lot of coverage from the past few days. I went live twice on Thursday. We had a snow day. I was working from home, and so I was able to stream quite a bit on Thursday. Thank y'all again for joining. So I found this timeline over on, let's see, it is timelines.com. And so I do not know if all of this is completely accurate. I think a lot of times sites that devote themselves to following these things, normally they are really accurate, but I have a link to this site down in the description. So the individual here in the middle is Christina Parcell, and John Mello. It was was the father of their child. And over on the left is Zachary Hughes. And he's the one that was charged and convicted of Christina's murder. Okay. And if you don't know, like, please know that's what we do. That's what we talk about here. So this incident happened back in 2021, and it happened in South Carolina. Christina Parcell was found, and her body was surrounded by rose petals. Concert pianist Zach Hughes was charged with this crime. And I guess so. I didn't even realize. And so this is, I guess, John Mello might have been a music producer, according to this, because I thought they were friends. There were allegations of did they date, and I have no clue. So nothing to my knowledge, there was nothing about a romantic relationship between Zach and John. But there have been a lot of rumors flying around. I have no clue if any of that is true. All right. And Mello was in a custody battle with Christina at the time. And we've seen other cases where custody disputes have gotten really messy, and that can be really unsafe. And a lot happened. And the state, in their closing, they talked a lot about John Mello's actions and how he took the child to Italy without Christina's knowledge. And I also thought it was kind of tricky because the state said that there was no proof of SA. And those of us watching know that after the Schmurder, we know that they did find evidence that Christina and her boyfriend, with the allegation with the boy, but I think they have evidence because Brad Post is going to go on trial for CSAM charges. They found this after the fact, but there was no confirmed hard evidence of that prior to this incident. And so that's where I think if the father had searched her phone and found this, and that was the big trigger for this incident. I talked about a case here in the DMV, Virginia, DC, Maryland area, where a woman found out that her husband had been harming children at her daycare. And I do believe that that fact came into her trial, but it was because she found out about the investigation into him. and she says that she snapped. And the judge did allow, I believe, because I did not follow that case. It wasn't televised or anything, but I do believe the jury was aware of the victim in that case, and that's what we have to call him. Like, he's the one that he was gonna face criminal charges, and she shot him in a hotel room, and so that's what happened in that other case. And she was found guilty by a jury. I think she was only sentenced to like 4 years. Um, because I do think that because she used an emotional distress defense, that she was, and maybe the jury or judge consider that as a mitigating factor. I also thought it was odd that this just random guy, so Zach Hughes had never met Christina. So he had never met her a day in his life. And so, yes. So if you go back to day 7 coverage, so I ended up ending my stream at 6 p.m. So the jury, after about 2.5 hours, the jury came back with a guilty verdict in this case. And then I think they waited another, because they started the sentencing phase immediately. And Christina's sister, Latina, gave a impact statement, and then Zach's father spoke on his behalf to try to plead for mercy in his son's case. And Zach's father, tried to talk about that he's pure at heart, and in order to make good music, like, you can kind of tell the type of person someone is based on their music. And so Zach's father really tried to defend and say, he would have never done this if it hadn't been for a child that was in jeopardy. But in our society, we don't allow for vigilante justice. We just don't. And so he was sentenced to life. I do not know the rules for South Carolina, and so I'm not sure if that is with or without parole. But this is in South Carolina. He was also sentenced to, I think, 60 days for contempt of court, because during his testimony, that's my understanding. I've heard reports of this. During Zach's testimony, he was admonished multiple times to not bring up the essay allegations, and he did it over and over again. And that's where, to me, Zach came off as defiant, and he came off as, because his attorney was trying to make it seem like there was no hate in his heart. There was nothing but anxiety, and he really didn't want to do this, but this was the only thing he knew he could do to save this child. And that's where, in my mind, I can understand the compassion and wanting to protect and be there for a child, but that doesn't mean that you take away somebody else's rights. That's just my own personal thing. If I had been in his shoes, where I was pretty sure something was happening, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I'm pretty sure something is going on. I might mention my suspicions to the school. I might mention my suspicions to encourage the person to get into some outpatient therapy. But I personally feel that the child in this case has the potential to lose. Like, she lost her mother, who was, like we found out after the fact, the mother was not a safe person. And then also her father was orchestrating, was like trying to encourage people to do the crime too. And so he's now facing charges. John Mello was arrested. I It's my understanding he was arrested based on Zachary Hughes's testimony. And that's where I think a lot of people think Zach is kind of like a jilted lover. And I don't like, I think he was just trying to throw anyone else other than himself under the bus in this situation. And I am gonna try to launch some "Don't Do Crimes" merch, maybe by March 1st. Like, we'll see. So I am gonna try to work on that. I am gonna try to work on that. But and and Afton said the police were already looking into Mello, but I think Hughes's testimony, because I also think the child went into, and y'all can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that based on some of the things that came up, that the child is in protective custody as well. Um, just who very, very sad. Um, And Law Junkie, I agree with you. So Law Junkie says he should have never brought up his adoptive sister. That was his justification in his mind. And so the sentence says, um, he has a psychopath detector? Question mark. What a massive stretch. It made him look like a psychopath. And that's where I talked about feeling like he was projecting all of these feelings he had about Grace, and all of these feelings, Christina, who he does not know. And Zach admitted with his own testimony, so maybe he was a little too truthful, because he admitted that John Mello could exaggerate and could be a little over the top, and the way that he tried to go about things could be wrong, because they sent, you know naked pictures of Christina to the guardian ad litem. John Mello also, had some outrageous behavior. It's my understanding it might have been threatening behavior with the guardian ad litem. And so all to me, because when we talk about motive, I know he's now saying that the reason why he did this was to save the child and to keep the child from turning into her mother. But it seems more like he was trying to help his friend get custody, because they did not have confirmation that the essay was happening. In their messages, um, they did not know that for sure. They just didn't. And I think that might have been why, part of the reason why. And remember his parents, so the adoptive parents are the ones that renamed her. So Grace was not the name that she came with from Russia. I saw it in another chat. I forget if I was over on Lawyer Lee's channel, or I forget where I was, but over on one of the lawyers covering this case, there was information about because the family is the one that changed her name to Grace, and she might have changed her name after that, or she could have kept it. I don't know. I've worked with some adoptees that have, once they've turned 18, they've changed their name back to their birth name, or if they didn't have a good adoption experience. I've worked with some people that have changed their names. Some people are saying that her name was Elena, and if I was her, I would have changed my name back as well. And I felt like he was desperately trying to protect his image. And what I mean by that is I think Zach wanted to be viewed as this hero, as this savior of children, when really, like, the way that he stabbed her 35 times. He talked about all the planning and all the thoughts that went into it, and how he tried to make sure that nobody else was there. And I don't know if how he talked about getting into the house. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but in his own testimony, he said that he said he had a delivery for her sister. And all of that, just it felt icky to me, and it really gave me the creeps. It was hard for me to listen to his testimony. If y'all like my facial expressions, and if you haven't seen me trying to listen to him, I think it was like an hour and a half or 2 hours of us listening to his testimony. It was a long time. Maybe it was, I forget how long. But by the end of his testimony, I was so done. And somebody was so sweet, and they were like, "Dr. Barry, can you please go back to his testimony?" And I was like, "I would rather eat nachos. I would really rather do let me go change a light bulb real quick. Go back to his testimony? No, I can't. I just we've already suffered through enough. Um, because, I think he was trying to show emotion at times. He was trying to describe how hard it was for him to do the act, and but I think all of that was to try to say there was no malice in my heart. And to me, and I don't know this for sure, to me, I think the defense attorney probably recommended different strategies. And a different strategy to take is that maybe it was try to point the finger towards somebody else, try to say there isn't enough evidence to convict my client of this, and the client doesn't get on the stand and badmouth his sister for like 45. Grace had nothing to do with this case, absolutely nothing. But I felt like he talked about Grace for a good 45 minutes. And and if I was the jury, I would have been so confused listening to him talk about, you know, what he experienced from a 10-year-old. She was 10. She was 10 years old, adopted from Russia, and he was maybe I've heard in the chat he might have been about 13 years old, but like, it just came off odd. I don't think, because some people are trying to say, like, were there inappropriate was there anything inappropriate on his end towards the little girl in this case? And I don't get that feeling. I don't personally get that feeling at all, but exactly, Love America, he wanted credit for saving her and didn't acknowledge the trauma of, like, her never being able to see her mother ever, ever again. Even if it was, like, in jail, like, even if her mother is in jail. Um, I hope that the little girl in the case, I hope that she has good therapists. I hope that she has, supportive people. I hope that she is safe. And I hope that she is okay. Let me see. Oh, so Super Kelly. So the adoptive. During this case, after talking about all of his accolades and his like Juilliard training, he tried to go into the Marines, but ended up with like a stress fracture in his legs, and how awesome he was. He said, in order to understand what I did, you need to understand my sister. You need to hear about my sister Grace. And so his parents adopted 5 children from Russia. The oldest, it's my understanding the oldest was 10, and the family changed her name to Grace. So that's what, and this had nothing to do in my from my thinking, this had absolutely nothing to do with the case at all. And so Afton, it's my understanding that there was no hard proof of the essay prior to her being unalived. I think they thought that she might be on an escort website. I think they thought, not the mother, not the child. I think they thought that there might be something, but there was absolutely no proof, because the allegation, because on the stand, Zachary admits to making a false report to CPS that he was a neighbor and he had seen Christina physically and verbally harm the child, and that was false. That didn't happen. And and he said he did that so that the child could talk one-on-one with CPS. But if you make a false report, and let's say this child wasn't being physically harmed, and now they're trying to look for marks, or they're asking her those types of questions, that can be scary for a kid. Like they're like, "What?" Like somebody, a neighbor said, "My mom did what?" That could be really, really confusing for a kid, and so it's it's a lot. I also wonder if there was a significant age difference between Mello and Christina, because I think Mello's in his 60s, I think. I think there was a significant age difference, but that just is. And that's why, because I think at the time of the crime, I think, because Zach is 33 now, And so this all happened back in 2021. And so, yes. All right. That's a lot. All right. And then to talk about how he thought Christina was this evil, manipulative person, and then not even acknowledge the manipulation and the harm that him and Mello were doing in this situation too. And so it's, if you think that a child isn't safe, the way to get them safe isn't to make false reports and to stalk and harass the other person. That's I hate that, but I feel like I have to say it, like, that's not okay. Um, I don't know the age of the new guy, and he might be older as well. I don't know for sure. Let me see if Brad posts. Let me see if there's any information. Bradley post arrest South Carolina. Y'all probably know in the chat. Y'all probably know. Let me see. Because it mostly has the information about Zachary Hughes being sentenced to life in prison. Okay, so Bradley post. I don't have his age. Am I sharing my I'm not sharing my screen good because 'cause I'm clicking on all kinds of stuff. Let me see. He's charged with producing C-SPAN on several occasions. Um, looks like they were married this year possibly, but I can't find his age. Is that him? I think that's him. He looks significant. He looks older as well. If the picture I found okay, let me just share my screen because it's in a news article. I'm pretty sure this is him. He looks older too, which, I mean, it is, but this is what the internet says. So, I don't have a name under it, but that's on this article talking about this case. So that's what I think. Wow. So Post might be in his mid 60s. And so somebody asked if she might be a sugar baby, but it doesn't, I don't think those men were like paying for everything for her or anything. What I personally would wonder about is if there are, and some people date people older than them, but in my clinical experience, there's often daddy issues. There's sometimes a history of their own child harm. There's often like not a healthy or like looking to be nurtured and cared for more like a daughter than as like a partner. So, not sure, but yeah, so I think I point more towards daddy-ish, and then men that are older that get with younger women sometimes, or even women that get with men who are significantly younger. You all know, my husband is 3 years younger, but I would have never dated him if we had met when we were both at Virginia Tech. So I would have been a senior, he would have been a freshman, and if he had come up to me and been like, "Hey, do you wanna go out for coffee?" I might have laughed in his face because I'm like, "Aw, you little you're a freshman." Like, no. When I was a senior at Tech and he was a freshman, I would have no, I wouldn't have talked to him then. We met once I was already licensed and he was settled in his career. Yes. I use the word bougie, I use the word snob, I use all of those words. Yes. She ain't messing with no but not for me. So I I sometimes wonder if men are trying to manipulate younger women, and then also older men that get with, or just men that get with women with children, and then if the men aren't safe. And that reminds me of the Madeline Soto case, that it seemed like um, y'all know me and names. Oh, y'all know. I can't think of his, and I had wiped his name from my head so beautifully. What is Stephen Stearns? That Stephen Stearns would prey on women with children. And then we also covered another case recently of a guy that would intentionally date women with children. And so, thank you for putting the question marks. It makes it easier for me to see the question. Zach's rendition of the actual crime was so odd to listen to. Agreed. He had more emotion around his hesitancy, and I think he was trying to have emotion there. I think he was trying to show to the jury that it was hard for him to talk about it, and, Recovery Addict mentioned that he used distancing language as he described what he did and during the crime, and, uh okay, we're gonna talk about sometimes how religion can be used to harm. Okay. So, trigger warning for spiritual harm. Because in his testimony, Zachary Hughes talks about praying about this and it's almost like he's alluding to that God gave him the green light and God said it was okay for him to do this, when I personally that's not how I would personally feel. And also I would wonder, the if somebody in this situation that desperately wanted to do this act, would they be able to clearly hear the voice and intention of God without their own wants, desires kind of twisting everything? And that reminds me of Lori Vallow. So Lori Vallow feeling like, God tells her who's dark and who's light. And it just so happens that the dark people tend to be people that are against her, and the light people tend to be people that are like completely supportive and easily manipulated. Those are all of the light people, and all the dark people just so happen to be people that, she doesn't like. And so, red flag. Um all right. And so let's see. Just making sure I didn't miss anything. Definitely saw that hero complex, and I was getting, and I can't judge all of his personality based on his testimony. What I picked up in his testimony is that he was incredibly controlled. I think Recovery Addict mentioned his blink rate seemed normal. He didn't seem overly distressed. Even when there were objections, to me, he seemed defiant on the stand, but in a calm, psychopathic almost, like in a calm and feeling like I deserve to say this. I'm going to tell my story. Nobody is going to control what I can or can't say, because like I said, he violated the court's order. And so um so okay. All right. And so my son did, so we didn't get that much snow up here. The snow was further south, but I drive south to get to work. And I did not, I don't, I stayed home. Schools in Fredericksburg were closed, and so Dr. Barry was closed too. Um all right. So some people are mentioning savior complex with possibly some of those like psychopathic, narcissistic, righteous way, no empathy, no emotion. And yet, him trying to say that Grace and Christina were the unemotional, manipulative, you know, liars. Like he was, to me, there was just so much projection in this case. And to me, he didn't come across likable to me. I kept wanting to say that he kind of had a punchable face. Anybody else? Like, that was what if you watch one of my streams, there was something I wanted to say, but I didn't say it. And he hadn't been convicted yet, and so I didn't wanna say it just yet, but that was, like, something, and you can't judge people based on how they look. You just can't. But the whole time he was up there talking, especially talking about his adopted sister, who, to my knowledge, did not do a crime. Like, she didn't do anything at all. Like, why are we having this conversation? I just don't understand. Um, do you think if he was acquitted that he was a risk to reoffend? And um I wonder if that crossed the jury's mind. But the jury came to a pretty fast decision, so I think the jury was on the same page because I think their question was more about the harassment because he was charged with first degree and second degree harassment and first degree and second degree conspiracy. And so the jury's questions were more about those. It seems like the jury came to the guilty verdict relatively quickly. And I am starring y'all's questions, and so with his risk to reoffend, if there was another situation that he thought the person reminded him of a Grace like, and I still think so. Grace, in my opinion, showed signs and symptoms of reactive attachment disorder at 10 years old. And reactive attachment disorder can be treated even in older children. The older the child is, the more some of the patterns and routines may have settled, but the parent's response is incredibly important. And sometimes what I've seen and what I kind of thought about this case is that adopting a sibling group of 5 and bringing them all into the same home, all from Russia, that and then she starts having all these issues, all these problems. Who knows what the orphanage and what her life was like back in Russia? And sometimes I've worked with Christian families that are extremely rigid and they have all these rules. They're locking up food and like so all these things are happening that's causing more and more issues for the children in the home. And there are some adoption sensitive adoption and trauma informed parenting techniques that work with kids, and I shared one of those in a prior video. The whole praying thing came across as disingenuous. And also, this case was in South Carolina. And so I wondered if he was trying to get maybe some sympathy or like, but to me, that went more into his planning. Like, like this wasn't some random thing. It wasn't like it just happened. Like this was something that he thought about and planned and mulled over. And he's on the stand talking about I didn't want to do it. And it's but I think he was trying to not have that criteria for murder that that like ill will or what is it? It's the malice in your heart or whatever. So his hesitancy would be God saying, "Don't do it." Exactly. I thought like him getting nauseous on the drive over and all of his hesitancy, like his body not letting him, hit her with the pew pew, all of those things I would think would be saying, don't do the thing." He ignored it anyway. He seemed detached. That's how I felt. He was describing everybody else as unemotional. And when he talked about Grace describing, you know, these bad things and as though she was, talking about making a sandwich. And to me, he was doing the exact same thing. And he didn't seem to like connect those dots. Like you're doing the exact same thing to me. So yeah, it was it was so odd. It was so fascinating that's why I went live on Thursday. So I watched Lawyer Lee and Courtroom Confidential's coverage of this on Wednesday night, and I would have went live Wednesday night if I could have. Like but I looked at my schedule. I was like, "Okay, I can wait until Thursday morning." Thank goodness I didn't dream because sometimes when cases get stuck in my head and if I don't get it out, like it'll start infiltrating my dreams and stuff. Thankfully, it did not happen in this case. Where do you draw the line between someone who is rehabilitated and someone who will never change? And that's where the system has their marks for that. And there are offender risk assessments. So there are psychologists that meet with prior offenders. We talk about recidivism, so that's the rate at which somebody might do another crime. Some people learn from this, and it's like, oh, if I make this decision, I could get caught. Because I think he thought he was so smart. Remember, he brought the paint thinner, or somehow he had paint thinner to try to get rid of any evidence. Like, I think he tried to clean up the crime scene. I think I think he wanted to get away with this. I think he did. But his DNA was found under her fingernails, which and his attorney tried to get that thrown out, and it wasn't thrown out. Yes. So reactive attachment disorder is treatable. And sometimes when people are thinking about adopting kids, and if they have birth children, they need to think about the impact adoption will have on their birth children as well. And and the reason why I say that is because I've seen jealousy come up in the birth children, or the birth children being frustrated, mad, uh, have contempt for the adoptive kids if they're not following their parents' rules, if they're not, you know, acting like they want to be adopted, which some kids might struggle with the whole process. And that's just a normal part of a cycle of adoption. Like that happens so much. And so that's why, like, people really do have to sit down and think what what's going to be the impact of this long term. And yeah. All right. And that's why getting trauma and adoption competent therapist and assessments, that's why that is so important, because there might have been a psychologist that might have diagnosed Grace with conduct disorder, or that might have diagnosed her with but the minute I heard adopted from Russia at 10 years old, I would have had some questions about, what do you know about the orphanage? What was the staff ratio at the did has this child experienced any other traumas or any other harm? Because Zachary said they had limited information from Russia about her. And like, was there any evidence of harm towards other children in the orphanage? Or like, I would have so many questions in that situation. And the first thing I would personally rule out would be PTSD and reactive attachment disorder. But once again, I'm trained to do all of this. Now, I think Hughes and his dad mentioned that he had this strong moral compass, this sense of right and wrong, but I think it's his moral compass. Like, I think Zach Hughes had issues with, maybe, I don't know if he has issues with sex workers. I don't know. Like, I don't know if he has issues with certain people. And because he did not seem to have an issue with taking like taking someone's life. However he justified it, he didn't seem to have an issue with that. Now, I have family members that have been in very secretive parts of the government, and I don't know the details of the things that they've done. I do know that they have combat PTSD, and I do know that they've been in areas where they've done some things, and it was under the mission of the United States. And so that's a whole other situation. As a therapist, I work with military veterans, both active duty and retired, and their families. But in our country, we don't allow private citizens to decide who gets to live and who doesn't, even if there is a fear for a child. And so, yes, yes, yes. Um, Reactive attachment disorder is incredibly sad, and I would have never labeled. So if Grace at 14 had come into my office, and I saw, because it's my understanding that they had attempted multiple out of home placements for her, which can further break that attachment, and the child can learn, if I'm bad enough, they'll send me away. If I'm bad enough, they'll just kind of send me away. I did see the father's statement in support of his son, where he described him as brilliant and that strong moral compass and his pure heart and his strong moral compass and all of that. It was and then the judge sentenced him to life. And the judge didn't explain. There was no so that's why we're not even gonna watch it. The judge listened to what the sister said, what Christina's sister said. The judge listened to what his father said. Zachary did get very emotional hearing his dad speak on his behalf. Um, I personally feel, I don't know, but like it seemed like he was kind of crying about his situation and maybe the pain he's putting his family through or but his family does seem supportive of him and that just is. How does reactive attachment disorder present? And so, reactive attachment disorder is in that DSM-5. I have it right over here somewhere. And there's normally severe harm to a child between birth, sometimes prenatally. So from very early on until about maybe 5 to maybe it's early neglect and harm to a child that impacts the child's ability to attach and form healthy relationships with others. And it goes beyond having an insecure attachment. Because some kids, so I've worked with kids that were raised in a pretty neglectful home, but they were fed regularly. They did have safe teachers. They did have these other safe adults, and they didn't engage in some of the behaviors that are consistent with reactive attachment disorder. I went over some of the criteria in a prior video, but I'll just list some of that now. Some common symptoms is excessive lying, defiance, difficulty with rules, difficulty attaching, either attaching too quickly or not attaching at all. So yes. And then the second part of that question was what things happen in a house with a child who has that, their day-to-day life. And so when parents are raising a child that has this diagnosis, often there's adoption involved. In every case I've worked with, it's been either it's been social services related, or there's been some founded harm, or there's been severe neglect from an orphanage or something like that. But what can happen? It so there are treatments that help. There are treatments that can work. The Timothy Ferreter case. I have a longer video that goes into adoption competent care. I did a very long training with CASE. It's Center for Adoption Support and Education. If you're a therapist, you can always check out the adoptionsupport.org website. And that I'm not supported, like I get nothing for saying this, but I did their free training and it was phenomenal. It was almost a year long, but it was worth it because I had received training in trauma and I had received training in attachment, but adoption adds a unique element. And this training helped put all of that together for me. All right. All right. Yeah. And so, thank y'all. So y'all like me in yellow, y'all like me in red. Cause I like the yellow. And if so I do like, Kendrick Lamar's new song, and every time I wear the yellow, I scream mustard in my head, like, every single time. I scream mustard when I wear the yellow one. And so the infiltrating dreams, that's when I know I have to take a break from true crime, like, if it starts to get that bad. Um, yes, yes, yes. The Sarah Boone one, I think, was one of those after a period of time watching Sarah Boone. I think it was the George videos. The George videos got me. That one was tough. But I was able to recover quickly after that. All right. Let me see. And remember that psychopathology, so psychopaths, antisocial behavior, all of that is on a spectrum. and different people can be at different parts of that spectrum, and we have a pro-social part of that spectrum, and then we have like an antisocial part of that spectrum. And so, but like, or a maladaptive problematic part of that spectrum. So, all right. Yes. So I really enjoy working with military veterans. That's why I am battling it out with TRICARE, because mm, I won't say anything disparaging about them today. Mhm. All right. All right. Please be sure to like the video. Thank y'all for joining me. Let me know if y'all have questions, because that is what we are doing today. If you are a member, I will be doing a members only live tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. I will be twisting my hair, so I'm going to wash it off stream, and then I'm going to chat with y'all while I twist my hair. There is a new case that I'm going to look at possibly covering next Tuesday. It's Benjamin Elliott. He unalived his twin sister at 17 years old in her sleep. And I think they were both sleeping or something like that. And let me just share my screen real quick, because I think this is the next case that we're going to talk about, because they had a sleep the defense had a sleep expert come on to talk about this case. And so this will probably be the next one that we take a look at. ah. And for anyone considering adoption, so I think it's important to remember that children do not solve, like, so let's say I can't birth my own children. Um Adoption, so it, like, because I need to make sure that I heal that part, that I'm in a good place, because adoption requires more. So parenting is hard all on its own, and then adoption adds an additional layer. And I'm incredibly passionate about it. I support multiple kiddos, that some that are adopted by family members, some that are adopted through CPS, international adoptions, and but it's just it can be a lot. It can be a lot. Parenting in general, and then also that. Can I analyze the Kendrick Drake brief? So maybe we can talk about that are you and I do. So Drake lost. Like, what else is there to say? The man looked at him and said, "Hey Drake," at the Super Bowl. Hey Drake. Like, mm, hey. So, I saw a version on TikTok that was in Spanish. Somebody did Not Like Us in Spanish. So, all right. Yes, Sarah, congrats again to you and your wife. I think that is phenomenal. And so, like I said, I'm an advocate for adoption, but we have to center the needs of adoptive children. Because I saw a comment where someone knew of a situation. I think it's like might be like a family. They might be influencers that adopted kids from the Ukraine, and then they were like forcing the children to be American. Like, you're not Ukrainian anymore. Like, you're American now, and wanted them to like not speak their native language anymore. And that can add additional trauma to a child. And so I think it's incredibly important to I'm I'm having a squirrel moment, because I can't get Hey Drake out of out of my mind. I just can't. Hey Drake. I thought the show was awesome. I thought it was powerful. It was a statement. My mom could not understand it. My mom had to watch it again on YouTube with captions, I think. So my mom, she's never been a fan of rap. I asked her to please watch it, uh, because I thought it was pretty cool. Um, because Drake sued Kendrick to not play the song. I did follow. So if you want to hear a breakdown of it, Emily D. Baker did a phenomenal breakdown of the whole beef, and then Josh Johnson. So let me share his channel, and I'll share it in the chat as well. He does like I adore Josh Johnson's stand up. That is one of my favorite channels right now. So I will put that here in the chat, and I will share my screen because if because a um he did a phenomenal breakdown of the halftime show. And so it was great. So check out his channel. He's a comedian. He puts out a new special every week. Every Tuesday at 9, he puts out a new special. He's a correspondent on The Daily Show, and he's super great. So, yes, yes. Oh, yes, and Natalie Lawyer Chick. Y'all know I love Natalie's channel too. Natalie also did a breakdown of the Drake Kendrick beef as well. And so, all right. So my final thoughts on Zachary Hughes. I personally think the judge made the right decision to not allow the things that they found out about the mother after the fact, like because it would have been different if John Mello had found the CSAM before or something and had shared that with Zach or something. It just that wasn't what happened. And what if there was no harm? What if she was a safe mother? All that Zach Hughes had was John Mello's description. And so uh, the jury did not take long at all. The jury found him guilty of first degree murder, and then I think it was second degree harassment, and I think second degree conspiracy as well. And he was sentenced to life in prison. I think he still wanted the world to know that he saved a child. So I think from his image perspective, I do wonder if he'll like write a book about protecting. I don't know. Like I wonder, if we'll hear from him down the road because, or if he'll like start a prison band. I don't know. I don't know. I think he'll still try to do something great because I think he needs to be great. Like I think he needs to be the best and he needs to be on top and he needs to have those accolades. And to me, he is not a hero. My heart breaks for the child. I hope the child knows that it wasn't her fault. None of it was her fault. A lot of the adults in her life and the system failed her in major ways. And I do hope that she's safe, that she's able to get help and support. And once again, it's understandable that it was hard for her to come forward and to say what was happening. Her father took her to Italy for months out of nowhere, and like this, the whole thing is just ridiculous. Like, but couldn't you see him starting like playing Beethoven for the prisoners or because he has Beethoven memorized. Right. I could just see him doing that. And so oh I we'll see. We'll see what happens. I appreciate you all being here. Once again, I will be doing a members only stream tomorrow. Our case for Tuesday, I'm thinking right now, will most likely be that case of the 17-year-old. He's not 17, and I think he's like 20 or 21 because this happened a few years ago. But that case of the guy that unalived his sister, and he's blaming it on a sleep disorder. So that's interesting to me. We'll chat about it. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your Saturday and have a great weekend. Let me answer this question real quick because adult protective services is a thing if a senior or an adult with disabilities is being harmed. So I have had to call adult protective services before if there's a senior that I suspect physical essay, financial, if I suspect any type of harm to a vulnerable adult. And so seniors, all that good stuff. So yes, adult protective services is a thing. I joke. So my husband, we kind of joke. I like so I don't bully my husband, but like I do like like scaring him. Like so I'll be around the corner and I'll like or I'll just stare at him for no reason, or I'll do the I like to annoy him a little, and so we used to joke that we're gonna call husband protective services, but that's not and so he's fine, he's okay. Um, I like I like messing with him. He's fun. And so, your husband does that to you. I think that's great. You can let him know, "You're like Dr. Barry." And I'm the one with the channel. Like he could totally have his own channel where he talks about what it's like being married to Dr. Barry, and he won't do it. I promise he exists. He's always in the basement. Like, he's like, "Dr. Barry." So the child is here and dad is in the basement. Exactly. Couples that play together stay together. I hope y'all have a good one. I'm gonna encourage him. I hope y'all have a good one. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.